Senior Archivist Zeth Kaller, moved through the massive data halls of the Galactic Council archives on Nexus Prime with practiced ease. His 6 arms worked independently as he sorted through the newest batch of files that had arrived from Earth. Just 3 days ago, the humans had been members of the Council for barely 2 years now, and their integration process was still ongoing. Most species took at least 5 years to fully merge their databases with Council systems, so Zeth Kaller expected nothing unusual from this routine cataloging work, the first few thousand files processed normally through the translation matrix. Human languages were relatively simple compared to most galactic tongues, and the system had mastered English, Spanish, Chinese, and dozens of other Earth dialects within weeks of first contact. Medical records, trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and civilian communications all flowed through the system without any problems. Zeth Kaller barely paid attention as holographic displays showed successful translations appearing in perfect Council standard. Then something went wrong. The translation matrix began producing error codes he had never seen before. File after file of what appeared to be military documentation refused to process. The script looked almost familiar, but the system could not identify the language or provide any translation whatsoever. Zeth Kaller stopped his other work and focused on the problem files. He had processed databases from over 300 species during his career, and he had never encountered a complete translation failure like this. The military records covered the past 3 centuries of human warfare, from something called World War I through their recent colonial conflicts on Mars and Europa. Every single document was written in the same unknown script. Personnel files, battle reports, weapon specifications, tactical manuals, and strategic analyses all used this mysterious language that seemed to follow no recognizable patterns from any known Earth culture. Zeth Kaller immediately contacted Council Representative Vexteron, who had been assigned to oversee Earth's integration process. Vexteron listened to the report with obvious boredom, his translator clicking in annoyance at being disturbed during his rest cycle. The representative dismissed the problem as a simple clerical error, suggesting that humans had probably used some archaic military dialect that would be easily resolved once the proper linguistic experts examined the files. But when Dr. Namath arrived at the archive 6 hours later, her reaction was far from dismissive. The leading linguistic expert in the galaxy spent only minutes examining the mysterious script before her skin changed to the pale blue color that indicated deep concern among her species. She ran the text through every analysis protocol in her extensive database, cross-referencing it against historical records, dating back thousands of years. What she discovered sent cold fear through her entire being. The script was not human at all. It belonged to the Dekmori, a warrior species that had been completely exterminated by the Old Council over 500 years ago. No, Dekmori had survived their war with the galactic government, and their language had been considered lost forever. Yet here were human military records, supposedly written by humans, using perfect Dekmori script that should have been impossible for any Earth-born person to know. Namath immediately classified her findings and contacted Chairman Qualzentros directly. The council leader listened to her report in stunned silence before ordering a complete security lockdown on all human-related files. Within hours, emergency protocols were activated throughout the council bureaucracy. How could humans possess knowledge of a dead alien language that predated their space travel by centuries? What did this mean for Earth's membership in the council? Had humans somehow made contact with Dekmori survivors, or was something even more disturbing at work? Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Jake Morrison was enjoying a quiet evening in his office at Human Defense Corps' headquarters when his secure communication system activated with maximum priority signals. The message from Council headquarters was brief but urgent, requesting immediate clarification about human military documentation and demanding that Earth's official representative report to Nexus Prime within 24 hours, Morrison read the message twice before calling his aide into the office. Lieutenant Amy Brooks had been his trusted assistant for 3 years, and she was one of the few people on Earth who knew about the carefully guarded secrets that were now apparently under Council scrutiny. She saw the expression on Morrison's face and immediately understood that their worst fears were becoming reality. The two officers had spent years preparing for this moment, though they had hoped it would never come. Every human military officer, above the rank of major, knew about the secret that was now threatening to expose itself. They had trained for this situation, planned for it, and dreaded it in equal measure. The careful deception that had protected Earth since first contact was finally cracking under the weight of routine bureaucracy. Morrison activated the emergency communication protocol that would alert key personnel throughout the human military structure. Ambassador Chris Taylor would need to travel to Nexus Prime immediately, and General Lisa Park would have to make the difficult decision about how much truth to reveal to their alien allies. The conversation that was about to take place would determine whether humanity remained a trusted member of the Galactic Council or became another species, marked for extermination within hours of receiving the summons. Ambassador Taylor was aboard the fastest human ship available, racing toward Nexus Prime, with a small team of carefully selected advisors. Taylor had been expecting this day ever since accepting the position as Earth's primary representative to the Council. The ambassador knew that the truth about human military capabilities and their connection to the extinct Thekmori would eventually surface, but had hoped to maintain the deception for at least another decade while Earth continued building its hidden defenses. As Taylor's ship jumped through hyperspace toward the Council capital, Chairman Qualzentros was calling an emergency session of the full Council Assembly. Representatives from dozens of species received urgent summons to attend a closed hearing about Earth's membership status. The official agenda mentioned only routine administrative concerns, but the security classification and mandatory attendance suggested something far more serious was at stake. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reshape the entire galaxy's understanding of humanity and reveal secrets that had been buried for over 5 centuries. Ambassador Chris Taylor walked into the council chambers with steady steps, showing no sign of the tension that gripped every human who knew what was about to unfold. Beside Taylor walked General Lisa Park, the highest-ranking military officer in the Human Defense Corps and one of the few people alive who understood the full scope of what Earth had been hiding from their alien allies for the past 50 years. The assembled representatives from 47 different species filled the vast amphitheater with a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and barely controlled hostility. Many had been dragged from important duties to attend this emergency session, and their irritation was obvious in the way they shifted in their specialized seating and muttered among themselves in dozens of different languages. The translation systems worked overtime to keep up with the flood of complaints and speculation. Chairman Qualzentros called the session to order with 3 sharp strikes of his ceremonial staff. The sound echoed through the chamber and brought immediate silence, as every eye turned toward the human delegation standing in the center of the floor. The chairman's voice carried clearly through the chamber as he explained the reason for the emergency gathering, though he was careful to avoid revealing the full extent of what had been discovered in the archives. The questions began immediately and came from every direction. Representative Colmathan of the hegemony demanded to know why human military records were written in an unrecognizable script. Trade Minister Yextalar wanted explanations for discrepancies between reported human military capabilities and the advanced technology implied by their documentation. Security Chief Nalvorthan accused Earth of deliberately concealing information that was required under Council membership agreements. Taylor listened to each accusation with perfect calm, occasionally making notes but offering no immediate responses. The silence from the human delegation only increased the frustration of the alien representatives, who were accustomed to immediate explanations and desperate justifications from species facing serious charges. Several representatives began making open threats about revoking Earth's membership and imposing trade sanctions if satisfactory answers were not provided within the hour. When the initial storm of questions finally subsided, Taylor stepped forward and made a simple request that stunned the entire assembly. The ambassador asked for immediate access to the Council's historical archives, specifically requesting all records related to first contact protocols and the complete documentation. of the Thekmori extinction event. The request was delivered in such a calm, professional tone that it took several seconds for the full implications to register with the assembled aliens. A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the chamber as representatives realized that the humans were not only failing to provide explanations, but were actually demanding access to some of the most classified information in Council history. The Thekmori records were restricted to the highest levels of government security, and most of the species in the chamber had never been granted access to those files. The fact that humans even knew about the classification level of those documents suggested a depth of knowledge that should have been impossible for such a young council member. Chairman Qualzentros called for a temporary recess to consult with the council's legal advisors about the unprecedented request. During the break, Taylor and General Park were escorted to a secure waiting area where they could speak privately without being monitored by alien listening devices. Park activated a small human device that created a field of white noise around their conversation, ensuring complete privacy for their discussion. While the council debated in closed session, the truth behind human knowledge of the Thekmori began to unfold through carefully controlled flashbacks that revealed the real story of Earth's preparation for galactic contact. 50 years before the official first contact event that brought Earth into the Council, a heavily damaged alien scout ship had crashed in the Nevada desert during what humans remembered as a particularly intense meteor shower. The ship had been discovered by a routine military patrol led by Colonel Ben Price, a career officer who had been investigating reports of unusual debris scattered across 100 square miles of restricted government land. What Price found inside the wreckage changed the course of human history. Though the full impact of that discovery would not be felt for decades, the lone survivor of the crash was a warrior named Kelthnoron, member of a species that called itself the Thekmori. Despite massive injuries that would have killed most beings instantly, Kelthnoron remained conscious long enough to realize that he had encountered a previously unknown intelligent species. The warrior's first priority was not seeking medical attention for himself, but rather warning these new beings about the dangers they would face when they eventually reached the stars. Colonel Price made the decision that shaped everything that followed. Instead of immediately reporting the alien contact to his superiors, he chose to listen to what the dying warrior had to say. Kelthnoron spent his final 3 months of life sharing everything he could about galactics, interspecies warfare, and most importantly, the true history of how the Council dealt with species that might pose a military threat to the established order. The Thekmori had been a peaceful people who possessed advanced military technology purely for defensive purposes. They had made the mistake of being honest about their capabilities when they joined the galactic community, and the Council had responded by orchestrating their complete extermination out of fear that such a militarily advanced species might eventually challenge Council authority. Kelthnoron's ship had been fleeing the final battle of a war that his people never wanted to fight. Under Kelthnoron's guidance, Colonel Price assembled a small team of trusted officers who began learning everything they could about Thekmori, military doctrine, political strategy, and most importantly, how to hide their true capabilities from potential enemies. The warrior taught them to read and write in Thekmori script, explaining that this would allow them to keep their most sensitive military information secure from any species that might gain access to human databases in the future. By the time Kelthnoron finally died from his injuries, he had passed on enough knowledge to change the entire trajectory of human military development. Price and his team spent the next 50 years quietly building a shadow military structure that incorporated Thekmori tactical doctrine while maintaining the appearance of a primitive, barely space-capable civilization that posed no threat to anyone. When the Council finally made official contact with Earth, they found exactly what they expected to find: a young species with limited technology and minimal military capabilities that would be grateful for the opportunity to join the galactic community. The humans played their assigned role perfectly, expressing wonder at alien technology and humble appreciation for the chance to learn from their more advanced neighbors. The recess ended and the Council reassembled to hear Chairman Qualzentros announce their decision regarding the human request for access to classified archives. The tension in the chamber was thick enough to cut as every representative waited to learn whether the humans would be granted unprecedented access to restricted information or would be held in contempt for making such an audacious demand. Chairman Qualzentros announced that the Council had decided to grant limited access to the requested historical files, but only under strict supervision and with the understanding that the humans would provide complete explanations for their knowledge of classified information. The decision sent ripples of unease through the assembled representatives, many of whom had never been granted access to the same files that were now being offered to Earth's delegation. General Lisa Park stepped forward and activated a portable holographic projector that she had brought from Earth. The device was notably more advanced than the Council's own presentation technology, though this fact was lost on most of the alien observers who were focused on what the projection might reveal. Park's expression was grim as she began to enter commands that would display information that had been hidden from the galaxy for over half a century. The first image that appeared above the projector showed Earth's actual military fleet in all its hidden glory. Instead of the 30 outdated vessels that Earth had reported to the Council during their membership application, the display revealed a force of 200 advanced warships distributed throughout human space in carefully concealed bases. Each ship incorporated technology that was decades ahead of anything the Council believed humans possessed, and their weapon systems showed clear influence from military doctrines that had been considered lost forever. A collective gasp rose from the assembled representatives as they realized the scope of human deception. Species that had dismissed Earth as a barely civilized member race suddenly found themselves staring at evidence of a military force that could challenge their combined fleets. The numbers were staggering enough, but the technical specifications were even more disturbing. Human ships showed energy output levels that rivaled the most advanced Council vessels, and their tactical systems incorporated strategies that most species had never encountered. Admiral Rick Carter appeared as a holographic projection from the bridge of the flagship of the human fleet. His presence in the Council chambers caused another wave of shock as representatives realized that Earth maintained a military leader they had never heard of, commanding forces they had never known existed. Carter's calm demeanor and obvious competence made it clear that he was not some hastily promoted officer, but rather a seasoned commander who had been preparing for this moment for years. Carter began his presentation by confirming that human ships had been secretly patrolling the Outer Rim territories for the past 18 months, often preventing conflicts before they reached Council attention. He displayed tactical reports showing dozens of interventions where human forces had quietly resolved disputes between member species, stopped pirate raids, and even prevented 2 potential wars through carefully applied pressure and superior firepower. The revelation that humans had been operating military forces throughout Council space without permission or oversight sent the chamber into chaos. Several representatives began shouting accusations of espionage and illegal military action, while others demanded immediate explanations for how such deception had been possible. The translation system struggled to keep up with the flood of angry voices speaking in dozens of different languages simultaneously. Dr. Maya Johnson, Earth's xenobiologist and one of the few humans who understood the full scope of their military enhancements, took control of the presentation as Admiral Carter's image faded. Her calm scientific manner provided a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil filling the chamber as she began to explain the biological and technological advances that Earth had developed through decades of careful research. Johnson revealed that human researchers had spent the past 50 years studying Thekmori biotechnology, leading to advances in human genetic enhancement and combat effectiveness that far exceeded anything the Council had imagined possible. Every human serving in military or space-related duties had undergone modifications that made them superior soldiers compared to most alien species. Though these enhancements had been carefully designed to be undetectable by standard Council medical screenings, the genetic modifications included enhanced reflexes, improved physical strength, increased resistance to radiation and hostile environments, and most importantly, improved cognitive processing that allowed human military personnel to think and react faster than their alien counterparts in combat situations. These advantages had been tested and refined through decades of training exercises that incorporated Thekmori tactical knowledge, creating a human military force that was prepared for conflicts that the Council could not imagine. Johnson's presentation included detailed analysis of human performance in various simulated combat scenarios, comparing enhanced human capabilities against the known military statistics of all major Council species. The results were unsettling for the alien representatives, who realized that they had been sharing space with a species that could potentially defeat any of them in direct military confrontation. The biological enhancements were only part of the story. Johnson explained how human engineers had reverse-engineered Thekmori technology to develop weapons, shields, and propulsion systems that were generations ahead of anything Earth had officially demonstrated to the Council. The integration of alien technology with human innovation had produced hybrid systems that were more effective than either species could have developed independently. As the full scope of human military capability became clear, the mood in the chamber shifted from anger to fear. Representatives who had been demanding explanations began to realize that they were not in a position to make demands of a species that had clearly been preparing for potential conflict since before joining the Council. The balance of power in the galaxy had suddenly shifted in ways that none of them had anticipated. Ambassador Taylor finally broke the tense silence that had fallen over the chamber. In a quiet voice that carried clearly through the vast space, Taylor asked the question that cut to the heart of the matter. Why did the assembled representatives think humanity had gone to such elaborate lengths to hide their true capabilities from their supposed allies in the Galactic Council? The answer came in the form of historical data that Taylor began displaying on the chamber's main screens. Records from the Thekmori extinction event showed the same pattern of Council behavior that had led to the complete destruction of a peaceful species whose only crime had been possessing superior military technology. The parallels between Thekmori integration into the galactic community and Earth's current situation were impossible to ignore. Taylor's presentation showed how the old Council had initially welcomed the Thekmori as valuable members of the galactic community, praising their advanced technology and peaceful nature. But as the warrior species became more established and their true military capabilities became apparent, Council leadership had begun to view them as a potential threat to the existing order. Fear had gradually replaced cooperation, and eventually, the Council had found justification for a preemptive war that resulted in complete genocide. The chamber fell into complete silence as the assembled representatives realized what Taylor was implying. Humanity had been operating under the assumption that honesty about their capabilities would result in their extermination, just as it had for the species that had taught them to survive in a hostile galaxy. The elaborate deception had not been an act of aggression against the Council, but rather a desperate attempt to avoid the fate that had befallen their alien teachers. The final piece of Taylor's presentation was the most disturbing of all. Long-range human sensors had detected massive ships approaching from outside the galaxy, matching descriptions that the Thekmori had provided about an extragalactic invasion force that the old Council had dismissed as propaganda. The invasion that the warrior species had died trying to warn about was finally coming, and humanity appeared to be the only species that had taken their warnings seriously. Archives Keeper Jean Walsh stepped forward to address the stunned Council chamber, carrying with her a data storage device that contained information which would completely rewrite galactic history. As Earth's representative to the Council Historical Department, Walsh had spent years carefully gathering evidence while maintaining the appearance of routine academic research. Her findings were about to shatter every assumption the assembled aliens held about their own past and the true nature of the Thekmori extinction. Walsh activated her presentation system and began displaying documents that had been hidden in the deepest levels of Council archives for over 5 centuries. These were not the sanitized historical records that most species were allowed to access, but rather the actual communications and strategic planning documents created by Council leadership during the period leading up to the HFY War. The evidence painted a picture that was radically different from the official version of events that had been taught to generations of galactic citizens. The first set of documents showed that the HFY had not been the aggressive conquerors that Council records portrayed, but rather a peaceful species that possessed superior military technology purely for defensive purposes. Their weapons were designed to protect their worlds and trade routes, not to conquer other species or expand their territory. Internal HFY communications, intercepted by Council intelligence services, showed a species that was genuinely committed to peaceful coexistence and mutual prosperity. Walsh displayed communication logs that revealed how Council leadership had deliberately provoked conflicts with the HFY, then used their defensive responses as justification for increasingly aggressive actions. Trade disputes were manufactured, border incidents were staged, and diplomatic negotiations were sabotaged to create the appearance of HFY hostility. Each defensive move by the warrior species was twisted in Council propaganda to support the narrative of an aggressive alien threat. The most damaging evidence came in the form of recorded strategy sessions where Council leaders openly discussed their intention to eliminate the HFY as a potential rival. The conversations showed that the genocide was not a reluctant response to alien aggression, but rather a calculated move to eliminate a species whose very existence threatened the Council's military supremacy. Several current member species had representatives in those planning sessions, and their participation in the conspiracy was documented in meticulous detail. Commander Kyle Bennett, head of Human Intelligence Services, took over the presentation to reveal how his teams had spent years piecing together the true story of the HFY extinction. Human agents had worked throughout Council space, carefully gathering fragments of suppressed information while maintaining perfect cover as routine diplomatic and trade personnel. The scope of their investigation had been vast, covering dozens of worlds and hundreds of classified archives. Bennett's evidence showed that several current Council member species had not only participated in the genocide, but had actively profited from it. HFY technology, resources, and territory had been divided among the victorious species, with Council leadership taking the largest shares for themselves. The war had not been about protecting galactic peace, but rather about seizing the wealth and knowledge of a species that was too advanced for their neighbors' comfort. The presentation continued with evidence that the HFY had been sharing their medical and technological advances freely with other species right up until the moment the Council turned on them. Breakthrough treatments for dozens of diseases, revolutionary agricultural techniques, and advanced manufacturing processes had all been gifts from the warrior species to their galactic neighbors. The recipients of this generosity had repaid it with betrayal and extinction. Dr. Susan Martinez, Earth's leading expert on alien genetics, presented the most shocking revelation of all. Her analysis of genetic samples from various species throughout the galaxy showed clear evidence of HFY medical intervention. Dozens of current Council member species showed genetic markers indicating that they had been saved from extinction by HFY medical technology. Entire civilizations owed their continued existence to the species they had later helped to destroy. Martinez displayed genetic evidence showing that the HFY had quietly prevented at least 12 species extinctions through advanced medical intervention, never seeking credit or recognition for their life-saving work. They had operated mobile medical stations throughout the galaxy, responding to plague outbreaks and genetic disorders that threatened entire civilizations. Many species that were now voting members of the Council would have died out centuries ago. Without HFY assistance, the final and most devastating piece of evidence came when Walsh revealed the contents of the last message transmitted by the HFY government before their capital world was destroyed. The message was not a threat or a declaration of war, but rather a desperate warning about an extragalactic invasion force that was approaching the galaxy from beyond the cosmic void. The warrior species had detected the incoming threat through their advanced sensor networks and had tried to warn their neighbors about the coming danger. The Council, Leadership of that era had dismissed the warning as propaganda designed to create fear and justify the Ekmori military buildup. They had interpreted the alien species' attempts to prepare joint defenses as evidence of aggressive intent, never realizing that the Ekmori were trying to save the entire galaxy from conquest by an external enemy. The irony was overwhelming. The species they had destroyed for being too militaristic had actually been preparing to defend all of them from a threat that the Council was too arrogant to acknowledge. Walsh displayed the technical specifications of the approaching invasion. Force as described in Ekmori intelligence reports. The enemy ships were massive, heavily armed, and showed clear intent to conquer rather than communicate. Their technology was advanced enough to pose a serious threat even to the combined military forces of the entire galaxy, and their numbers suggested an invasion on a scale that the Council had never contemplated. The silence in the chamber was deafening as the assembled representatives began to grasp the full scope of their predecessors' mistake. Not only had they committed genocide against a peaceful species, but they had also destroyed the galaxy's best chance of defending against the very threat that was now finally arriving. The Ekmori had died trying to save civilizations that had betrayed them, and their warnings had been ignored for over 5 centuries. Ambassador Taylor stepped forward once more to deliver the final revelation that would change everything. Long-range human sensors, operating far beyond Council space using modified Ekmori detection technology, had confirmed that the invasion fleet described in the ancient warnings was real and was finally approaching the galaxy's outer edge. The enemy force was massive, technologically advanced, and showed clear intent to conquer rather than communicate. The approaching ships matched the Ekmori descriptions perfectly, down to their distinctive energy signatures and tactical formations. Humanity had been tracking their approach for over a decade, using the warning signs that their alien teachers had left behind to prepare for a threat that the Council had refused to acknowledge. The invasion they had died trying to prevent was finally coming, and Earth appeared to be the only species that had taken their warnings seriously. Taylor's presentation concluded with long-range sensor data showing the exact position and projected arrival time of the invasion fleet. The enemy would reach the galaxy's outer rim within 18 months. And their apparent destination was the heavily populated core systems where most Council member species maintained their homeworlds. Without proper preparation and united resistance, the galaxy faced the same fate that had befallen countless others beyond the cosmic void. The Council chambers erupted into chaos as the full implications of the human revelations finally sank into the minds of the assembled representatives. Centuries of accepted history had been revealed as lies, and the comfortable assumptions about galactic politics had been shattered in the space of a few hours. Species that had built their entire governmental structures on the foundation of Council leadership suddenly found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about their own past. Representative Colmathan of the hegemony was the first to break the stunned silence, his voice shaking with rage as he accused the humans of fabricating evidence to justify their deception. But his protests died away as other species began to access their own classified archives and confirm the authenticity of the documents that Walsh had presented. The truth was undeniable, and the weight of historical guilt began to settle over the chamber like a suffocating blanket. Several representatives began to panic, as they realized that their own species had participated in the Ekmori genocide and would now face judgment from their own populations when the truth became public. Others sat in stunned silence, trying to process the knowledge that their civilizations owed their very existence to the species they had helped to destroy. The careful political alliances that had maintained galactic stability for centuries began to crumble as trust evaporated between former allies. Chairman Qualzentros struggled to maintain order as accusations flew between species, and long-buried resentments surfaced in the face of revealed truths. The translation systems worked overtime to keep up with heated arguments in dozens of languages as representatives demanded explanations from each other about their ancestors' roles in the genocide. Several species threatened to withdraw from the Council entirely rather than accept responsibility for historical crimes they had not personally committed through the chaos. General Lisa Park stood calmly at the center of the chamber and waited for the emotional storm to exhaust itself. When the noise finally began to die down, she stepped forward and made the offer that would determine the galaxy's future. Her voice carried clearly through the vast space as she presented humanity's terms for the new alliance that would be necessary to survive the coming invasion. Park explained that Earth possessed not only the Vekmori military knowledge, but also the industrial capacity and strategic planning necessary to organize a defense against the approaching enemy fleet. Human shipyards had been secretly producing advanced warships for decades, and their military commanders had been training for exactly this type of large-scale conflict, using tactical doctrines developed by the galaxy's greatest warriors. They were prepared to share this knowledge and coordinate a joint defense, but only under specific conditions. The first condition was complete transparency about the true history of the Vekmori genocide. Every species would be required to open their classified archives and allow independent investigation of their ancestors' roles in the extinction. The truth would be made public throughout the galaxy, and appropriate memorials would be established to honor the memory of the warrior species that had died trying to protect civilizations that betrayed them. The second condition involved a complete restructuring of Council authority to prevent future genocides and ensure that military strength would never again be viewed as grounds for extermination. Species would be encouraged to develop their defensive capabilities without fear of persecution, and decisions about war and peace would require unanimous consent rather than simple majority rule. The days of Council leadership orchestrating conflicts for political advantage would end permanently. The final condition was the most difficult for many species to accept. Earth would assume command of the unified defense effort with human military leaders taking control of the combined galactic fleet and all strategic planning for the coming war. This meant accepting that the species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers were actually the most qualified defenders the galaxy possessed, and that their survival depended on trusting the humans they had underestimated for so long. The debate that followed was intense and often bitter, with several species threatening to leave the Council rather than accept human leadership. But as Captain Danny Foster of the Earth Survey Corps presented detailed intelligence about the approaching invasion fleet, the reality of their situation became impossible to ignore. The enemy force was vast beyond imagination, and without unified resistance under experienced leadership, every civilization in the galaxy faced complete destruction. Foster's presentation included intercepted communications from advanced scout ships that had been probing the galaxy's outer defenses for the past decade. The enemy spoke in mathematical concepts that suggested a hive-mind intelligence, and their strategic planning showed no interest in negotiation or coexistence. They viewed the galaxy as a resource to be harvested, and every living being within it as an obstacle to be eliminated or enslaved. One by one, Council species began to vote in favor of the new alliance despite their reservations about accepting human leadership. The process was painful and humbling, as it required them to acknowledge that their entire governmental structure had been built on lies and genocide. Some species withdrew from the Council entirely, unable to accept the truth about their history or unwilling to submit to human authority. The hegemony was the last major power to join the alliance, with Representative Colmathan casting his vote with obvious reluctance and barely controlled anger. His species had been among the primary beneficiaries of the Vekmori destruction, and accepting human leadership meant giving up centuries of political dominance. But the alternative was extinction, and even his pride could not overcome the survival instincts of his people. 6 months later, the galaxy had been transformed into something unrecognizable from the political structure that had existed before the human revelations. Admiral Rachel Torres, a veteran of the secret human fleet, commanded a massive armada that combined the military forces of dozens of species under unified human leadership. The ships incorporated hybrid technology that merged human engineering with rediscovered Vekmori designs, creating weapons and defensive systems that were more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The joint fleet assembled at the galaxy's outer rim as long-range sensors confirmed the approach of the invasion force. The enemy ships were even more massive than the Thekmori warnings had suggested. But the defenders were no longer the divided and unprepared civilizations that had existed during the warrior species' time. They had been united by necessity and guided by the tactical knowledge of the galaxy's greatest military minds. Ambassador Taylor stood on the observation deck of the flagship, looking out at the assembled fleet that represented the combined military might of over 40 species. Beside the command center was a memorial wall that bore the names and images of Thekmori warriors who had died defending a galaxy that had betrayed them, their sacrifice finally receiving the recognition it deserved after 5 centuries of being forgotten. As the invasion fleet finally appeared at the galaxy's edge, Admiral Torres gave the order to advance. The combined human-alien fleet moved to intercept the enemy, their formation perfect and their coordination flawless. The tactical doctrines developed by Kalthnaran and his people guided every movement as the defenders prepared to fight for the survival of every living being in the galaxy. The final surprise came when human sensors detected automated distress beacons broadcasting from several of the approaching invasion ships. The signals were transmitted in perfect Thekmori script, suggesting that some members of the warrior species had somehow survived their apparent extinction and had been fighting this enemy alone for 5 centuries, waiting for someone to hear their call for help. The galaxy's defenders were about to discover that their greatest teachers might still be alive, and that the coming battle would reunite them with allies they thought had been lost forever.